Coach, you mentioned during your Twitter Q&A today that you have an unusually large bladder. When did you
I went
realize?
from Salt Lake to California in a car without stopping one time to do anything. So that's pretty unusual, is it not? I mean, it's like 9 hours, 10 hours.
When did you realize you had this skill?
On that ride. That ride was indicative or very informative for me that I haven't stopped to go to the bathroom or anything for 9.5 hours. So I was pretty pleased.
Pac-12 Panic Room plus BYU plus USU plus Weber, JP Chunga, Mitch Harper. I didn't expect coming out of the Kyle Whittingham press conference to be talking about his bladder, but here we are.
Yeah, we're talking about the bladder. And the thing is, the specific memory that Kyle Whittingham had about his bladder and when he knew he had a big bladder was what stood out to me, JP.
690 miles, he said, on that Honda Accord. I was sort of the guy when we had a road trip, I would be asking to go to a bathroom break every single time we could. So I can't really relate to Kyle Whittingham on that end.
No, I'm someone too that when I need to take my breaks on a vacation, I need to go to the restroom and maybe get a drink or something. Maybe that's my problem. I drink too many drinks or have snacks, all these sugary things. But Kyle Whittingham, that doesn't surprise me. So now we've learned he never takes naps. He hasn't went to a mall in 30 years. And now he's got the biggest bladder on earth. Granted, though, there's some competition here in the building. Bill Riley himself has said he's got a big bladder too. So maybe as of this recording, we're doing this on a Tuesday, maybe later tonight on the coaches show, Bill and Whit will determine who's got the biggest bladder of them all.
Pac-12 media days. Bill didn't get up to go to the bathroom in like 6 hours.
That's a good point.
It was amazing what you could see from him. But Kyle Whittingham clearly in a good mood at the press conference because his team got the win against Stanford. And you've got to say, this opens up that narrow path to winning the Pac-12 South, keeps it open for Utah.
It definitely does. I mean, had they started out 0-3, they would have been out of the Pac-12 running and the race for the Pac-12 South, even before playing a Pac-12 South team. So I thought that was a dominant victory. Stanford was pretty much outclassed, I thought, by Utah. Utah played excellent. The offense was rolling in, and I think you're seeing, with Jim Harding a little bit more involved with the offensive play calling, or at least the scheme, but the preparation for the scheme. I think it's helped matters for Utah to really establish that identity and have success in games like this. And they've always matched up well with Stanford, but I just thought the manner in which they came out and they got up 21-0, I thought that was an impressive statement for Utah to bounce back.
And the fact that Tyler Huntley now playing with confidence, I think this was a really good bounce back game for him. Not only throwing the ball for nearly 200 yards, but even rushing the ball. He was impressive in that area. He was just a playmaker. The guy who was named the Gatorade Player of the Year in Florida finally showed up for Utah and was able to deliver in the biggest stage for his biggest win as a Pac-12 quarterback.
Well, and Damari Simpkins said to us here on ESPN 700 that he felt good to finally have that offensive production that they expected to have, but he wishes they could do it at home now, and they got that chance coming up on a short week against Arizona. But yeah, it was a much-needed source of confidence for this Utah team against a good Stanford team. I don't think, even though Stanford dropped out of the top 25, I don't think they're suddenly a terrible football team, but I think that without Bryce Love, you do see some severe flaws for a team like Stanford against a matchup in Utah that they just never have done well against. Utah now 4-0 all-time on the farm, and that goes back to their days in the WAC, so they've been dominant there.
78-38, last 2 weeks for Stanford. 78-38, outscored in those two games. I also look at that Bradley Anae play. Mm-hmm. I think he just killed a guy and might have destroyed the Cardinal season.
It'll end around for Michael Wilson, the freshman. He gets drilled by Bradley Anae. You know how important Bradley Anae is to this Utah defense.
They were fantastic. They were great. They were dominant to the level that we expect from a Utah defensive line.
Looking forward to this game coming up on Friday against Arizona. But the other big game in the Pac-12 South happened in Boulder. CU taking down ASU 28-21, and a little bit of injury trouble for the Sun Devils. Manny Wilkins and N'Keal Harry look banged up.
Yeah, that's concerning for ASU, who continues to just exceed expectations. They were very competitive in this football game, but Colorado, undefeated still. Chenault had a huge day, the running back for the Buffs. This is a good offense. They continue to find players continuing to evolve in their roles, and they become big playmakers. I'm very impressed with Colorado. Now, granted, another conference game at home, so let's see what they can do on the road when they get in league play. But still, Arizona State was a team that was right near the top of teams going into league play as to maybe the top of the Pac-12 South as to who could win it. And I think that Colorado got a really good win against ASU. And for Arizona State, maybe we now start to see the wheels potentially fall off with those injuries to Wilkins and Harry.
So you've got Colorado against USC this week. That's going to show us a lot in the Pac-12 South in terms of CU. But then the next week they've got Washington,
Yep.
so a big back-to-back slate for Colorado looking forward into the Pac-12. That Utah game at the end of the Pac-12 season for the Utes could be very impactful on what they see going forward. But looking at the game that we were at over the weekend, BYU demolished by USU. I was just struck by how much of a demolishing it was from USU and the fact that BYU has zero margin for error against decent teams.
They really do, JP. I mean, BYU has no margin for error, and I think they were dominated by Utah State. It ended up 45-20, but really should have been 13. BYU got tacked on a late touchdown, but I think that touchdown signified something for BYU moving forward, because I think sometimes, like last year, BYU goes 4-9, they bottom out, changes happen. BYU, I thought kind of bottomed out on Friday night against Utah State, and that's not to take away from Utah State, who's now receiving votes right there next to Utah in the AP Top 25, but I think it was just a matter of how do you go from beating Wisconsin and out Wisconsin,
Yep.
and then you just get completely demolished against Utah State on your home field. How does that happen? I felt like this was a little bit of a bottoming out, and I think that drive that Kalani and Jeff Grimes saw from Zach Wilson showed him something, particularly with his feet, and then the ability to make some of those throws, over-the-shoulder throw. I think there's some serious conversation, JP, about Zach Wilson legitimately being the starter, and Tanner Mangum's era at BYU could be done, barring an injury to Wilson.
We were both in the Zach Wilson camp heading into this
Yep.
season for BYU, but I had two questions leading out of this game, so I'll start with the BYU one first. Is it time to make that switch for BYU and lead with Zach Wilson going forward?
I think it is. I think it's time to move on, because now everything nationally for BYU is off the table. I mean, You could have made the case after the Wisconsin game, hey, if BYU ran the table or went 10-2, maybe they could find a way to get an at-large New Year's Six bowl. Maybe, just maybe. I know they don't have a voice at the table, but it could have maybe been a case just because of BYU's strength of schedule. Now that's gone. Now BYU's playing for Beef O'Brady's or Bahamas, whatever it may end up being. So now you want to kind of, I think, build for because this product right now, they're not beating Utah. They're not beating Boise State's the best teams left on their schedule. So I think you got to get someone in there that can give you some hope that maybe you can win those games, maybe. And I think Zach Wilson represents that hope for BYU.
Zach Wilson gave something for that BYU offense. It was Matt Bushman after the game that just called him an athlete.
Yep.
He said he was good in that respect. He started his BYU tenure with a wonderful scramble, and then fittingly it ended with a Gunnar Romney touchdown pass.
Yeah, and I think that's what BYU wants to see. I mean, touchdown passes, only the second wide receiver to have a touchdown pass this year, and one of them comes from a true freshman connection. So I think Zach Wilson, I think initially, JP, that was a drive where just get Mangum out and don't let him get hurt. But then when Zach went in and they gave him a chance to throw the football, and then he did some things with his feet, I think that suddenly became just kind of an afterthought. Or first it was an afterthought drive, but now it became where now there's a debate. And now there's going to be probably split reps, or maybe a majority of the first-team reps going to Zach Wilson this week.
Will be interesting to follow. The second question that I had, is USU poised for a New York Six run?
Yeah, I think Utah State is impressive with Boise State losing over the weekend to San Diego State at home. Utah State might be the best team in the Mountain West or Mountain Division, at least in that conference. I think San Diego State might be the best team overall, but Utah State looks good. And you look at their schedule, games with UNLV at Colorado State. I mean, I just think there's not many games outside of that Boise State one that I say chalk up an L. I think that Utah State can win all their games. And if they're 11-1, you probably might need, if you're a Utah State fan out there, you might need UCF to lose 2 games because they got a lot of, I think, the way and manner in which UCF is dominated. I don't think they're going to drop out of the polls significantly unless they get blasted by someone unexpected. So they might need 2 losses for you to get higher than them, but no reason to think with Utah State's success, the way they dominated BYU on a national platform, it's right there for the taking for Utah State to have a really big year this season.
They need to have a dominant offense because how many eyes are going to be on Facebook to watch your game?
Yes.
Starting this weekend.
That's true.
Against UNLV, game will be on Facebook. Not great for Utah State, but great if they continue to win these games just like they did last week against BYU. That's been the Pac-12 Panic Room. We'll be looking at the games ahead in the next video. But for Mitch Harper, I'm JP Chunga. Until next time, bye for now.